folks, we're studying Bereshit 39 and 40. Our last discussion was really good. There was some very interesting stuff there. I know you guys probably saw the email that I sent you all that Mike had listened to our conversation and had some further insights. That was pretty cool. We will start here at Genesis 39, verses 1 through 6, and we'll just take this a little chunk at a time, and we'll start here. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and he was sold to Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh, chief of the executioners. Yours might say chief of the butchers, chief of the slaughterers,
captain of the ground.
An Egyptian man from the hands of the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. And Yehovah was with Joseph and prospered him, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And the master saw that Yehovah was with him, and that all that he was doing, Yehovah was blessing. And Joseph found favor in the eyes of his master, and he ministered to him. And his master made him the supervisor over his household, and all that belonged to him was in Joseph's hand. And Joseph was blessing the Egyptian's household due to Joseph, and Yehovah's blessing was over all, in the house and in the field. And the master left all things in the hand of Joseph. And the master concerned himself with nothing except the bread which he ate. And Joseph was of a lovely shape and appearance.
Lovely shape.
Now we got the stage set here. This is our first section about Joseph actually being brought down to Egypt. And just a quick question. Why do you suppose that Yehovah is blessing the work of Joseph's hand?
Well, that was a question I had yesterday, so
Well, tell us about it.
I don't know why.
Oh, you don't know why? Oh, okay.
That was a
I had a
question.
question, but
You got a question, but no answer.
First of all, he trusted
I didn't
God.
know why.
Well, I think that
Totally.
Aunt June is absolutely correct that, frankly, the Torah has not been given yet, but we know from the Torah of Moses, which would essentially, in my firm opinion, the Torah is very much in effect. The world was created through the Torah. Yeshua is the Torah. The whole world was created by the power of the Torah. In fact, the rabbis teach that the whole world is held together like the letters of the Torah are holding creation together, which is a kind of neat idea. But I believe that we can see from Joseph's behavior that he is, I would consider him to be a righteous man, especially since he is a kind of a presage, a precursor of Yeshua the Messiah. You would kind of expect that you would, in fact, this is one of only a handful of people in the whole Bible who there's nothing negative said about them. Nothing at all. Unless you guys are aware of something that I'm not aware of. This is one of only, who is it? Anybody else think of anybody else in the Torah or in the Tanakh or in the New Testament that is identified as having nothing against him?
That would be Elisha or Elijah, wouldn't it?
No, Elijah had a problem.
He did.
Yep, he did not believe in Yehovah when he was he thought he was the last, and he was praying, and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah? Get back where you're supposed to be." So God rebuked Elijah a little bit.
What about Samuel?
Daniel?
Samuel.
Oh, Samuel. Yeah, Samuel.
And Daniel, too.
Daniel, yeah, Daniel is another one. So there's just a handful of people in the Torah and the Talmud, the Hebrew Bible, that talk about people who just don't seem to have any faults. And Joseph is certainly one of those. It seems to be a man of wisdom. He's about to be tempted, just like Yeshua was tempted, but he did not succumb to the temptation. So it is my belief that he is being blessed by Yehovah, and the work of his hands is being blessed because he is a follower of Yehovah, and he does what is right. I firmly believe that. Now, we do know that, yes, bad things happen to good people.
They do.
That is true. But, it's so difficult for us to determine and try to figure out why is seemingly God blessing someone and not someone else. That really is, that's what the whole book of Job is about. You know, because his wife and his friends are saying, you've done something wrong. You have done something to deserve this. You just don't know what it is. Job also is one of those people in the Torah who is not identified as having done anything wrong, and except horrible things happened to him. But that was, and I think this goes back to that prayer that we just prayed, the Amidah, which kind of focuses our mind and our attention on the fact that our Father is in charge completely of everything, and that He will allow something into your life that you have absolutely no idea why. And you have to trust and have faith that it is going to work out perfectly. But you can only see that in hindsight. I know that, I imagine that some of you have had some tragedies in your lives. I know many of you well enough to say you have had some tragedies in your life. And I also know you well enough that you would say that God blessed me amazingly and powerfully through this tragedy.
Yes.
And that it was for a reason. Now, maybe those tragedies are still fresh and you're not sure what those reasons are. And they may not show themselves for a while, but I am absolutely certain, just like Paul said in our book of Romans study last time, that all things work together for good for them that love God and that are called according to His purpose. So that is what I would say was at the root of why Joseph is having everything that he does. It's like he's got the Midas touch, and everything is turning to gold. You know, it's all happening well for him. And why is it happening well for his master, the Egyptian? Because of the promise given to Abraham. I will bless those who bless you, and he who curses you, I will curse. This guy, this Potiphar, treats Joseph well. He recognizes him as a good servant, and he is blessing Joseph. Joseph does good work for him. Everything that he does turns good, and the guy promotes him to the head over everything. And so because he is blessing Joseph and Joseph is blessing him, it's working out exactly as God had told Abraham and Isaac and Jacob that it would. Exactly. That would be my take on it. Did that answer your question, kind of? I know it's a little bit of a difficult, challenging question. I struggle with that too. But I firmly believe that we have to hold our faith and belief that this is happening for a reason and I can't see it now and it's got to be good. And, you know, and if you look around the world and you see people who are evil being blessed, well, I would go to the scripture that says God causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Because those people, I would call them, heathen, whatever you want to call them, people who do not worship God at all, and yet they seem to have success in their life. Well, why not? This life is all they have. Yes, sir.
But could their blessing be coming from a different source?
What would that be? Does Satan have the power to provide things?
Yeah, material things.
Of course he does.
If you go ahead and your cohorts are with you in evil, you can make great gains on however you're getting those gains.
True. I suppose it's, if Yeshua was tempted by the devil and the devil was offering him wealth, riches, and powerful kingdoms of the world, that he wasn't making a bogus offer. So yeah, I certainly would accept that. Yes, Anthony. Sorry.
Well, I remember Monty saying that people can unconsciously follow Torah, and therefore you receive the blessings for not knowingly following the rules, but yet you still.
I think that's certainly
receive
true.
I
them.
think that's what Paul says, if they become a law unto themselves. I think
Yeah,
probably that's
absolutely.
what by that.
I know that there are people who don't believe in God, but who are very moral and you could consider them to be a fairly righteous person. They're nice, they're kind, they don't lie and cheat and steal, and they're loving to the people. God will bless that. I certainly believe that. Mike?
I was just thinking, God, everything is for His glory. So you see time and time again in the Word that He's placed wicked people in power. He's blessed, people that have sinned, and it was all for His purpose and plan and glory. So you don't know.
That's the hard part, is not knowing what His plan is, because it's so huge and grand, and we just have to have faith that His plan is perfect.
Yeah.
Do you think, though, that God created the character from the person, or is it being shaped? that's always my question, because a little bit what Tammy's question was Joseph already being pre-created to fulfill that destiny and therefore also have that character, those character traits, charismatic and what have you,
Yeah.
or was he so believing that he became like that? Because like a Jacob, he was not such a good person, yet he was blessed.
Yeah, yeah, he definitely did some deceiving in his days, yes.
Well, I was thinking Joseph when he was younger, if anybody wants to say he ever did anything, maybe boast, like, hey, I had these great dreams where I'm way up here and y'all are way down there.
Yeah.
And
It didn't seem like he
maybe
even understood
Yahweh
that, though.
gave him that. So he knew he was destined for greatness. Yet I bet he didn't think that when he was in the cistern, you know, like, wow,
Sure.
that work out, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Or in jail.
You know, yeah, I think that, you know what, when I studied Calvinism back in the 90s, one thing that kind of struck me about this idea of predestination is that God will provide man with a free will, and that man has a free will, and yet it will not disrupt the plan of God in any way, shape, or form. That just, to me, speaks to the power of the Father, and that His will, His intention is always, and I think that you may need to separate will from intention, because His intentions are going to be done. His will is not always done, but His intention is going to happen. So whatever He intends to happen will happen. It may not happen the way He would have liked it to happen if we had behaved ourselves or whatever, but His perfect intention is going to happen every time.
A kind of neat example of that is when Moses struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. God still did what He was going to do, but Moses paid the penalty. And that's kind of like, you know, how the choices we make. We may still, He will still do His will, but you're going to have to pay the consequences for your choice.
Yeah, and you can also see in the prophetic picture in Moses striking the rock twice. And Paul talks about, you know, you crucifying anew the Messiah. I think that's it. But it all fits perfectly. That's just the power of our God, is that everything just works perfectly, no matter what you do. That's amazing to me. Absolutely amazing to me. So I wanted to bring to your attention, and this kind of jumps forward just a little bit, but there's so much coming up in the next sections that I kind of wanted to address it here. It says that 3 times we see that a master put all things into the hand of Joseph, and that he himself concerned himself with nothing. What can we glean from this about the relationship between the Father and the Son, and what might this teach us about the nature of our own relationship with Yeshua as the master/navigator of our lives? Notice that in the case of Potiphar, in the case of the chief of the prison, and in the case of Pharaoh, when he is elevated to be master of all of Egypt, he is put in charge of everything. The master puts all things into his hand and concerns himself with nothing. What does this tell us about the relationship between the Father and the Son? So we want to look at a prophetic picture here about maybe this is a relationship between Yeshua and his Father in heaven. What do you think about that? Yes.
Immediately what I think of was, I didn't come but for the will of the Father. I didn't come to preach anything new. I only came saying the words of my Father, His doctrine. So I just think of they're one, you know, they're Chad. And that's what I think. That's what comes to my mind immediately. So He knew that ultimate trust both ways.
Yeah, we have ample evidence in the New Testament that the Father has put all things in the hands of the Son. So it's a perfect picture, and it's repeated 3 times in this story. So that's definitely of some significance. Now, taking that just a little bit further, and I know that you have to change the metaphor slightly, but consider that who's in charge here? Who is ultimately in charge in all 3 of these situations?
God.
The master is in charge.
Yeah.
Potiphar's still in charge.
God's in charge in all 3.
The head of the prison is still in charge, and the king of Egypt is still in charge. But he has to actually trust in Joseph every day to say, "Oh, you want to take the rugs out and have them clean? That sounds like a good idea. Go for it."
What I find interesting about this, though, is that it says in here that he identifies that basically that he's strong with the Lord. The force is strong, and this one, so he puts him in charge. I find that interesting because it's Pharaoh, and they believe in a million gods or whatever. So I wonder how they decipher that in their minds, going, well, he must know, but the things that he says isn't about all their weird stuff. It's but he can identify it and see it in him to that level where he hands everything over.
I think that's a good point because that these people would believe in a plethora of gods, that they have a god for everything.
Right.
A god for fertility, and a god for growth of the crops, and a god for the moon and the sun and the river and the frogs and the bees and the birds and everything. And so it seems to me, when you look at the story of the Exodus, for example, that Moses comes and turns the water into blood, and the sorcerers of Egypt can do that as well. They can turn snakes into snakes. So certain of these false gods, their prophets or whatever, their practitioners, have some type of power, demonic power, obviously, that we consider it. So now, and you can see in the story of Daniel, and in the story of the Egyptians, in the story of Nebuchadnezzar, in the story of Cyrus, that these people value people who are soothsayers, wizards, necromancers, whatever. I mean, they're all searching, just like everybody is today, for secret, esoteric knowledge that you can only gain by means of the occult. Now, Joseph seems to demonstrate this, but where does he attribute that power from?
God.
God. Okay, so the point, I think, is that he would have been elevated to this position because he would have been seen as a person who, and you can see that Pharaoh says the power of, some kind of power with this guy. We haven't seen anything like this ever, maybe, and this guy's got wisdom from above. We can't find anybody wiser than him, but he had to put him in charge. And the same exact thing happened with David. So,
and what's interesting is if you read, I think, right, was it 5? It says, the overseer of the house and all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. In other words, like, it seems like he's almost like protecting him with the power that he has. Not even so much that he's, just because he's around these people, they get his blessings, like you were saying, came down from Abraham, but it's like the Lord's protecting him to say that for his sake, because if he doesn't keep producing whatever it is he's seeing or whatever these people are seeing in him, then, well, it happens just in just a little while anyway, which is funny how a female does that. But anyway,
don't be like that.
well, I'm just saying. No, I'm not talking like that. I'm saying it's just like Adam and Eve. It's just like it's a weird thing how we talked about it too. But I don't know. It's I find that one odd because he's talking about how it's almost like the Lord's got to do it for the sake of keeping him okay and safe.
We're going to touch on that in a few minutes. Tracy?
I think one of the reasons why, and this may have been touched on, I don't know, he finds favor in the eyes of man, obviously because he honors God, but because he also is submissive to authority. And I think that's something that we all are supposed to be learning from this.
Yeah.
We can see this in our lives if we, just like Daniel too, is if we are submissive to our authority, whether we're being treated well or not. You'll rise above.
I agree.
You'll find favor in the eyes of God and of man.
Yes, I agree. And if you look at this relationship and kind of imagine how might these relationships that Joseph has with his master be a kind of a picture of your own relationship with Yeshua, you can see that who's in charge of your life?
God is.
We are.
You are. You're in charge of your life. Does Jesus want to take over your life and make all your decisions for you?
Oh, no.
He wants to influence them. He's not going to make the decision for you. You make the decision.
Yeah.
And I think that many of us in maybe some of the traditions that we came from, and we can kind of get a little weak in this area, is thinking that we're going to give over our lives to God and He's going to do everything for us.
Oh, no, he
And
won't.
all we have to, there was a whole book about let go and let God. Well, that's a great idea to an extent, but God expects you to live your life. but he wants to be influencing your life. That's why I put the word navigator there, because he'd love to navigate your life for you, but you try to get out of the driver's seat and put him there, you're going to crash, because he will not take over your steering wheel.
Because when I did that back in the church days, and I remember being very frustrated, like, why aren't you doing this for me?
Why aren't you doing anything?
I'm telling you to do this, and I give you free reign, and yet, why aren't you doing
Nothing's
this?
happened. Yeah. And I think this is a perfect picture, if you will. We kind of can get into our minds, the idea that Joseph is in charge of everything, and the guy is not bothering with anything. But the guy in charge still has to listen to Joseph, and Joseph is not going to be presumptuous as a servant and just take everything over and do it himself. He's still going to go to the master and say, this is what I think we should do. This is what he did with Pharaoh when he said, here, look, man, you got this problem. We need to store up some food. And he's presenting the idea to the master. And the master says, well done. You're a good servant. That's a great idea. Let's do it. And so the master continuously is in charge, but the servant, Joseph, the servant Yeshua, is ready to make suggestions, and is ready to help you, and is ready to guide you, and is ready to navigate your life. But he expects you to take the steps. You've heard the expression that a moving car is much easier to steer. I remember that from a long time ago, and I thought I would apply that here. It's true. If you're moving your life and you're actually taking those steps, it's much easier for him to guide you where he wants you to go. But if you're just kind of resting on your laurels and saying, where are you? What do you want me to do? You're going to be sitting there for a while until you get frustrated.
Tracy and I were looking at the parable in Luke of the rich man and the steward, and you know how he just kind of like wastes.
Oh yeah, when he gave talents to the different individuals.
This one was the one where.
This is the one where he was told on. The steward was told on to the rich man, saying he was squandering his goods.
Oh,
He said,
right.
give an account for your stewardship.
Right,
Tell me,
right.
You're not allowed to do this.
He like
anymore.
starts cutting deals with some
Yeah.
people, and it was kind of a difficult parable to work through, but this helped because it gave that whole relationship between the master and the steward, and how the master probably didn't have a full account and understanding of what was happening because he gave that trust to the steward.
That's in Luke 16.
Right. Yeah. Right. You can mark that down in Luke 15 if you want to take a look at that and kind of see how it.
That is a tough one, because at the end, after he wheels and deals, the master's happy, and I'm going, huh?
Yeah,
I thought he would be
that's what
upset.
kind of made us go, maybe that's why, because he doesn't know what he's got.
Right.
He doesn't know what he's doing. He just knows he got something.
Okay. That's a good tie.
It could be though. I don't know.
Yeah. Good idea. Good idea. Okay. Well, let's move on to our next little section here. This is Genesis 39, 7 through 19. It says, and after these things, the wife of his master turned her eyes upon Joseph and said, lie with me. And he refused, saying, behold, my master is unaware of what is with me in the house, and all that is his is in my hand. No one is greater in this house than I, and he has not kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. And how shall I do this great evil and sin against Elohim? And she spoke to Joseph day by day, but he did not submit to her and lie beside her to be with her. And it happened that Joseph was in the house to do his work, and no man of the servants of the household was there in the house. And she grasped Joseph by his cloak, saying, lie with me. And he left his cloak in her hand and fled and ran outside. And she left his cloak beside her till his master came home. And she informed the master, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came to laugh at me, and said to me, lie with me. And I raised my voice and called, and he left his cloak beside me and fled from the house. And his master heard the words of his wife, saying, according to these words does your servant to me, and his anger burned. Oh boy. Difficult challenges coming here. This woman was actually tempting to Joseph.
I do.
You do? Now, the sages, the rabbis have for generations said that this woman was a real looker, that she was really a knockout, and that it would have been an actual temptation. And I think
She's with the high up Pharaoh. That's like what Sarah said last time we were talking about. Well, this guy's high up with Pharaoh. I mean, he's probably, you know.
These powerful guys have decent looking.
Yeah, he's got a she's probably a trophy wife because that's what we're talking about.
That's certainly possible. And how does this relate to Yeshua? Well, I think it's apparently pretty obvious that he was tempted, and yet without sin, that he did not give in to the temptation.
What's interesting to me about that is he left his garment. That didn't really make sense to me, but I can draw parallels with
Yeah, she grabbed a hold of him and he
It seems to
just.
me that might be what happened, is that she kind of attacked him.
Yeah.
Like trying to
she
take
grasped
his
him.
clothes off, and he, you know.
Yeah, but everyone was turned by that proof that was left, even though it wasn't true. It's almost like there's this, you know, people believe what they believe and that he's not Christ, and that there's all these things. There's like, well, we're going to pose this as proof of why it's not him, but it is him. And it's like the same kind of, because I don't know, in my mind, I can't imagine this woman tearing my clothes off as I'm trying to run away.
You never had a woman tear your clothes off?
Not as I'm running away.
Not as I'm running away.
I think that Potiphar must have believed Joseph on some level because he could have had him killed immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming to that for sure. That's a good point. And I think that I think it's certainly possible what Andrew was saying is true, that he was just not having any of it, and that she was getting rather aggressive and grabbed onto his clothes, and he, you know, you've seen how people will escape by letting you have their jacket or whatever.
Flee from temptation.
Yes, he was
I
fleeing
have in
temptation.
here that in my Bible it says that she grabbed a hold of his
Well,
garment
yeah.
and then he, you know, he was trying to get away, but she grabbed it. And same like if someone grabs your coat, you just let it go.
Yeah, you just let it go and you get out of there.
And he did the right thing. From when temptation was right in his face, he took off running. Literally, instead of staying there trying to talk her out of it.
Rationalize? Yeah.
And then end up, yeah.
Rationalize, absolutely crazy.
It's kind of a cool picture of something that's talked about in Proverbs 6. Can I read it?
Absolutely, please do.
My son, keep your father's commandment and forsake not the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart and tie them about your neck. When you go, it shall lead you. When you sleep, it shall keep you. And when you awake, it shall talk with you. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep you from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. Lust not after her beauty in your heart, neither let her take you with her eyelids. And it goes on about that. But
With their eyelids. Fake eyelashes.
I mean, it's kind of a little illustration of this.
Garment of wisdom protecting.
It's fun.
That's an interesting insight. You know, it always kind of puzzled me why she says to her husband, that Hebrew servant that you brought came in to laugh at me. What's that all about?
She's a liar.
Well, why did she say he came in to laugh at me? Why didn't she say he came in to rape me?
Right.
Well, you know what's interesting? If you look at that same Hebrew word is the one that is used in Exodus 32:6, where it says that the Hebrews set up the golden calf and began to party and drink and rose up to play.
Yep.
It's the same exact expression. He was laughing at me. It literally means to engage in frivolity and wanton sexual behavior.
Ooh, wonton.
I thought, but the way it's translated
Karate
here,
Kid.
it's like he came to laugh at me. It's like, well, they were to laugh and to play. They were engaged in sexual immorality, and she was accusing me of that. And I thought, well, what is that? How does that tie in? Because it's an interesting thing, speaking to having to do with some type of sexual immorality, having to do with idolatry. In that case, in Exodus, but it certainly makes a lot more sense than saying he came and tried to laugh at me.
What is the word?
Well, if you look at Exodus 32, Exodus 32 verse 6, what is it?
It's a cop.
Sukkot? Yehovah tomorrow. And they rose early on the morning, and they offered burnt offerings and brought near peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to make merry, to play, to laugh at me. It's the same word.
To laugh at God, you mean?
No, she said that this Hebrew slave came to laugh at me. And I just thought, why would they use the same phrases when they rose up to play before the golden islands? Kind of an interesting. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you see any correlation?
Yeah, but my translation says, he tried to bed me or whatever. So it's like the same thing. It's frivolous.
Maybe it's the word party.
Party. You tried to party with me?
I think it's the same reference for like Sarah talking about Isaac, because his name means laughter.
Yeah.
And then also when Hagar's son was mocking Isaac.
Yeah, it just struck me that something was going on here. I just wondered why she put it that way, or why the trend. So the master's anger burned, and you brought this up a minute ago, Kenrianne. Let's move forward just a little bit and talk about the anger burning of the master.
I think he's really burning at his light.
I kind of think that might be what it is. It's just this last section
Thanks,
here.
when you want.
In Genesis 39, 20 through 23, let's finish that part up. It says, "And Joseph's Lord, master, took him and gave him over to the dungeon, the place in which the king's prisoners are bound. And he was in the dungeon. Yet Yehovah was with Joseph, and he was stretching out to him in kindness, and gave him grace in the eyes of the chief of the dungeon. And the chief of the dungeon gave into the hand of Joseph all the prisoners who were in the dungeon, and of all that was being done there, he was the one doing it. The chief of the dungeon paid attention to nothing that was in his hand, because Yehovah was with him, and all that he did, Yehovah prospered." So my first question here was, if the master believes that Joseph tried to rape his wife, doesn't he have him immediately executed?
Right. And he kills the baker, for crying out loud. What did he do?
Why? So it seems to suggest to me that, and the kids had the same idea, that he actually did not believe his wife.
I don't think so.
But here she is now.
Yes,
She waited. If you go back to that previous passage, she went there when no one was there, and then she waited for all of the servants to come home, and she told everyone, and then she told the master. So this story has been circulated that one of the slaves rose up and tried to rape the master's wife. This has now gotten out. I think that Potiphar is kind of socially obligated to take action. You cannot allow a slave to do this. And I think that he is angry that he has lost his most excellent servant, who has been blessing the work of his hands, and everything is going awesome, and he now has to do something, because if he takes the side, you cannot take the side of a Hebrew slave over your Egyptian wife. That's not going to fly. And I think probably what happened is that he was angry because he's lost something very valuable.
That was part of her intent. She purposely spread, like you said, she spread it ahead of time so he had no choice but to do something.
Yeah, he couldn't.
She would have kept it private,
right?
Then he would have probably sided with Joseph, but she made sure everybody knew that it would hurt his reputation if he didn't do something.
There's kind of another mirror of that with John the Baptist and that whole thing, because he made the commitment that he would do whatever she says. It's like once the king says.
You're talking about the girl who suggested that they cut off his head?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's like he's like, whatever you want, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
He
And
makes
because he
commitments.
said it in front of everybody,
Right.
he was responsible.
He was feeling sorry about that, but he had to do it.
Yeah. And I think that that's a testimony, is the fact that he gets sent. And frankly, I think that you might look at this as a white-collar prison, the minimum security prison. This is the king's prison, where the king's, political prisoners maybe go, people, young princes and princesses that are being held for ransom, whatever. This is not the maximum security Supermax facility, in Guantanamo Bay. This is a minimum security prison. So the fact that he was accused of raping an Egyptian master's wife and he's put into a white-collar prison suggests something to me. And that is that his master probably did not believe his wife.
Or he was scared of him. He was afraid to drop the hammer on him like he might want to.
Excellent idea.
So, I mean, he can get him away from him, but I'm not gonna kill this guy because I know he's something about him.
That's also an interesting idea. It hadn't occurred to me that could also be as well. That he was like, the hand of God is obviously upon this guy, and I'm having some suspicions about my wife in general. So I'm gonna just play it safe, and I'm gonna just send the guy to prison.
So he did something and shut his wife's mouth up.
Well, yeah,
Send him
now
away without
now
killing
they don't
him.
have the blessings of Yehovah in their household, and
Yeah.
she's gonna not get to buy her fancy jewelry because the.
And are we assuming that the reason that because it sounds like a hit job to me, it doesn't sound like she was just trying to get lucky with him. She went way out of her way to have him pushed away. Like it seems like maybe it's almost like him being head of the household. Almost for some reason she didn't like it.
Well, think
Maybe
about
he
this.
told her she couldn't buy some jewels.
Well, think
He
about
said it
this.
wasn't in the
If you look at this as a picture of the Messiah, Yeshua, being tempted by Satan, what is the plan of Satan? To derail the plan of God.
Right.
To try and get everything off the track. To get the servants of God. He knows he can't attack God directly, so he attacks God's servants to get them to divert from the straight and narrow path, and that will try to defeat God's will. But we've already discussed how you cannot defeat God's will. Satan knows that, but he can take pleasure in thwarting God through you by getting you off the track, and then he can laugh and point the finger at God and say, look what your servant did. Now that does not work in this case, and God's plan is still going to happen. In fact, it is probably precisely because of this woman, the devil, tempting Joseph, that he gets into a position in the prison where he is able to interpret the dreams of the master of Egypt's servants, and everything's working out just according to plan perfectly. But it seems probably at the time like this is going horribly wrong for everybody.
Or why? But then down the road, it really turned out.
It's turned out exactly
not just for the benefit of him and for the Egyptians, but for everybody, his own family.
It's working out just exactly.
So bad things happen to good people, and God takes all the bad, and He does turn it around and make it good.
Yeah.
In that
Always.
case, God plays her.
Always.
Absolutely. So, I meant to ask this question in relation to going back to this verses 7 through 19. I just wanted to ask you what you thought of this. When Joseph says to her advances, when she makes advances to him, he responds to her in this way in verse 9. He says, "No one is greater in this house than I am, and he has not kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. And how shall I do this great evil and sin against Elohim?" If this is a picture of the Messiah and the Father, what would this woman represent? Well, you can see it as that, and we've already kind of covered that. But is there something that the Father has kept back from Yeshua that Yeshua would immediately recognize and say, that's not mine, I'm not touching it? I'm just curious, because he seems to say, because if we're following this metaphor, and maybe I could say, hey, maybe I'm taking this metaphor too far, and you can tell me if I am. But it just seems strange to me that there might be something here, that everything has been given to Joseph except one thing. And when he says, he does not say, I'm not going to sin against my master by sleeping with his wife. He says, I'm not going to sin against God. I think that might be a hint. Can you, in your mind, in your theology as you know it, is there anything that the Father has said, this is mine, and that Yeshua would willingly say, that's yours? Anything?
The only thing I think of is how Christ knew he had to die, and he didn't want to. Didn't he? I don't know this for sure, but
yeah, he says that this cup can pass for me. If there's any other way to complete this,
right?
I'm not really
That's the only thing that I can think of. Not exactly in the context that you're saying, but it is somewhat of a.
Yeah.
I think the authority of his word too.
The authority. I think you're absolutely right. That was what my idea was, is that the ultimate authority is with God. and that he is not willing to usurp the one thing that belongs to the Father, which is authority. And remember that Yeshua comes and is coming soon to establish a 1,000-year reign on this earth. Now, what happens at the end of that 1,000 years?
New Jerusalem.
New Jerusalem comes down, and what happens then?
Doesn't he give authority back to his
He
father?
grants the authority back. He relinquishes authority back to the Father, and it becomes the kingdom of the Father, and no longer the kingdom of the Son. Now, I know that might sound blasphemous to some of you, I'm not sure, but just consider that the ultimate authority is with the Father, and that Yeshua himself repeatedly said, I am not speaking my own words, I do nothing except what the Father has told me to do or say, and that he is constantly pointing the worshiper up, up, up.
Doesn't he
Yes,
also
come
say that he's
through
the
me.
same thing as God? See, that's where I get confused with this stuff. He also states that he's one and the same. They're all the same thing.
Well, here's a very interesting thing, and this is something that you
One in
can
the
take a look
spirit,
at.
right?
I would encourage you guys to look this up.
In
You
agreement
will
with?
not find in the scriptures anywhere where Jesus says, I am God. It doesn't happen.
He says they are one, but he also says make them one as we are one.
Now, I know that you may
Unified.
trip out on that, but don't trip out. If you ask me, is Jesus God? I will say absolutely. If you say to me, is Jesus God? I will say absolutely not.
It's both then.
It's both. You cannot possibly answer that question. Yeshua himself and the gospel writers and Paul and all of them will come right up to that line, but they will not cross it.
Well, when his role here on earth, for us to understand what his role was, he was the Son.
Yeah.
And then that, we could understand that relationship because we really don't know the, you know what I'm saying? That's how we think. That's,
and
he
he
had to make
constantly-
it simple for us.
Yeah,
He didn't say, "I God, I'm here." No, he didn't want. He wanted us to follow, be not threatened. He didn't come down with any threats.
Right.
He said, "This is what I want you to do. This is how it's going to be. Follow Torah." But he didn't come down with all the mighty power. And the way he presented it was, "I'm the Son, and I'm presenting the Word." So it was more inviting that way.
Yeah, I have come to do the will of the Father and to show
Right.
you how to do the will of the Father.
Exactly, and that was the.
And he doesn't say, I want you to do my will. He says, I want you to do the will of the Father. And so he is relinquishing control of it to his Father. And it was just an idea that I had that perhaps this wife here, in a sense, is also a temptress and is the part of Satan tempting Yeshua. But it's also Yeshua saying the ultimate authority rests with the Father. And that's why I will not sin against the Father in that regard.
And do you remember the last time we were talking about Elohim is multiple, is more
Yes,
than one, plural,
absolutely.
plurality?
Yep. And that is one of the greatest mysteries of all time. That do I believe that Yeshua is the Father? Yes, I do. Are they somehow different? Is there some distinction? Yes, there is. I don't know how that works. That is a tremendous mystery.
I think it's interesting too in Matthew during the temptation. He says, you shall worship the Lord your God, and you shall serve him only.
Yeah.
And then the devil flees, and then the angels start to serve him. So I mean, even though he didn't come out and say it, the picture is, if the angels are serving him, and you should only serve God.
Yeah.
And others of the disciples fell down at his feet and worshiped. And we know there are pictures in the Torah that where someone shows up, an angel shows up, and they start to worship, and they no, don't do that.
Yeah. You
But
don't
in this
worship.
case, he doesn't do that. So it's a mystery. It's a mystery. It's a mystery. In any event, let us move forward. Now here's our next part of the story, which is chapter 40, verses 1 through 8. It says, And it happened after these things that the chief cupbearer of the king of Egypt and the chief baker sinned against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was filled with wrath against his two servants, the chief of the cupbearers and the chief of the bakers. And he gave them over to the chief of the executioners to the dungeon, the place where Joseph was bound. And the chief of the executioners gave Joseph supervision over them, and he ministered to them. And they were some days in confinement. And both men dreamed a dream. Each man had his dream the same night, each according to the interpretation of his dream. And the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, servants of the king of Egypt, who were bound in the dungeon. And Joseph came to them in the morning, and behold, they were turbulent. And he asked Pharaoh's servants, who were with him in the confinement of his master's house, "Why are your faces evil today?" And they replied to him, "A dream we dreamt, and there is no one to interpret it." And Joseph replied to them, "Do not interpretations belong to Elohim? Relate them to me, please." Now, interesting idea. Would you attach any significance to the fact that not only does Joseph have dreams of his own, but he feels confident that God will grant his petition to interpret the dreams of others?
No.
Especially when he says
That's a gift.
that those are actually for God to interpret.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but isn't that their relationship? I mean, he's been having dreams since he was a young boy, so that's always been what he knows
Sure.
with Yahweh.
How would you relate this to Yeshua?
It's just like what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, he's the only one that can do it now, tell me. Because you're not going to get to him unless you come through me.
Yeah. Look, let me throw this out to you. Think of how did God speak to Moses?
Face to face.
Face to face. Panim and panim. How did he speak to other prophets?
Dreams, visions.
Dreams and visions. So if Yeshua is a type of, if Joseph is a type of Messiah, and he has dreams and visions of his own, and he is able to interpret the dreams and visions of others, what does this suggest to you?
He's got a good gift.
True.
True, it is a gift.
And he's a
It's a
prophet.
prophet.
He's a prophet, and he interprets the prophets.
Yeah.
But he realizes by that statement, he also really says that what his relationship is then with God in 8.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Do not dreams and their interpretation belong to God? Yeah, absolutely.
So then it means the baker and whatever, they were prophets too then.
No.
Well,
Why not?
actually, God gave them a
It's
dream.
one cooked.
And this dream was, again, according to the foreknowledge of God and the plan of God. But I think that if you look at this as a picture of Yeshua, Joseph being a type of Yeshua, then this is showing us that not only is Yeshua a prophet, but he has the authority to interpret the other prophets. Does Yeshua interpret other prophets? Does Yeshua interpret other prophets in the Tanakh? Yes, he absolutely
Oh
does.
yeah, yeah.
He knows all of them.
He
There's a
not
lot
only
of
knows
them.
all of them, he will give you an interpretation. I mean, he's interpreting the book of Isaiah and showing you what this.
Oh, that's interesting.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So not only is he a prophet, because does Yeshua prophesy? Absolutely,
Yeah.
he does. He does prophesy, and he also interprets the prophecies of the Old Testament. Yes, sir.
Well, you gotta keep in mind, their little dreams were nothing more than that, to give the future of about a day ahead of time, or 3 days time.
3 days.
And then that was gonna be
Right.
the outcome of their life. No, it didn't affect anybody else, just that little picture.
But it was
there.
for a greater purpose.
Right, yeah, so
Yes.
Absolutely.
he got his recognition as being a dream
Interpreter
reader.
of dreams.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So that's just, I thought that was kind of an interesting section there, that if this is a picture of the Messiah, then the Messiah would not only be a prophet, but he would also interpret the prophets, which we know that he did.
Yeah.
That was kind of interesting. Going on to the next section, in Genesis 40, chapter 40, verses 9 through 15, it says, "And the chief cupbearer related his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 intertwining branches, and it seemed to be budding. Up came blossoms, the clusters of grapes ripened, and the cup of Pharaoh was in my hand. And I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said to him, This is its interpretation. The 3 intertwined branches are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your post, and you shall give Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to the former custom by which you became his cupbearer. Only remember me, please, when it goes well with you, and deal with me in kindness, and mention me to Pharaoh, and bring me out from this dungeon. For truly I was taken from the land of the Hebrews, and I have done nothing wrong that they should place me in this pit. And the chief of the bakers saw the good interpretation, and he said to Joseph, I dreamed in my dream. Behold, 3 days of bread was on my head, and in the top tray were all foods for Pharaoh the king made by baking. And birds of the heavens were eating them from the tray off my head. And Joseph said to him, this is its interpretation. The 3 trays are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head off of you and hang you on a tree. The birds of the heavens will eat your flesh off. And on the 3rd day, the birthday of Pharaoh, he made a feast for all his servants. And he raised the heads of the chief of the cupbearers and the chief of the bakers, and he restored the chief of the cupbearers, and he gave the cup into the hand of Pharaoh. But the chief of the bakers he hung, just as Joseph had interpreted. But the chief of the cupbearers did not remember Joseph and forgot about him.
Yeah.
What do you got?
That would be awful.
I can see somebody smirking over there. You got something you want to
Yeah, those weren't just dreams.
say? No, indeed not.
They weren't just about the cupbearer and the...
I totally agree. Let me ask you this. Is there any significance to the fact that these 2 men and their dreams have something to do with wine and bread? Blood
Yes.
And 3.
and bread.
And one of them gets raised up and the other is hung on a
And
tree.
it's in 3 days. What do you think about that? How might that relate to Yeshua? This one's a little tricky. Nobody? Angela?
I think the first one is the second coming and the second one is the first coming.
Kind of, it switched.
Yeah, I don't know why it switched, but it looks like it switched.
How do you
And the
relate those?
within 3 days is 1,000 days is a year. And then the second time, it's literally within 3 days.
Okay.
And this eat the flesh is what we do.
Yes. If you consider that wine is like blood and bread is like the body, then you can kind of relate this to Yeshua having his last Passover or his Seder or his last supper or whatever you want to say. When he takes the wine and the bread, he says, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Take and drink it. And then this is my flesh. Eat it. Now, what's interesting is that in the memorial to Passover and in the memorial to Yeshua's Passover or Last Supper or whatever, what is the blood and the body for? In the Passover, let's start with the Passover. What is the blood for?
Atone for sins.
Oh.
Who's it for? I mean,
For anybody
what do
that
you do
asks.
with it? What do you do with the blood?
You put it around the
Put it on the doorpost.
Put it
door.
on your door.
Right.
So where are you?
You're inside.
You're inside.
Go through.
So the
So
door
who's
of
it
your
for?
heart? The door of your
Section of
pass through.
It's for God to see you. The blood is on the outside of your house. You are on the inside. When God sees the blood, he passes over you.
So he sees it.
What do you do with the flesh? What does the flesh represent in a Passover?
The lamb,
It's the lamb. What do you do with it?
eat it.
You eat it. So God passes over you, and you eating that flesh provides you with the strength physically that you will need to live your life and walk out of Egypt.
I thought that was the word. The bread. The bread represents the word.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you went there. If now we take that Passover and this picture here and we apply it to Yeshua, we say, what does his blood do? Where do you put it?
Cleanses. Put it in
It
there.
cleanses. It's almost like it's a sign
Yeah.
to God that he passes over you. You've been passed over from life to death by the blood of the Messiah.
Doesn't also seal the covenant? That's nothing blood is for.
Sure, blood will seal the covenant, absolutely. But now, if Yeshua's flesh, how do you eat his flesh? What was he talking about? Just like John just said, what is the flesh?
Yeah, the word.
It's the word. Okay, so
The crucifixion.
so if the blood of Messiah causes the wrath of God to pass over you, and you are forgiven of your sins because of the blood of Yeshua, then what does the body of Yeshua, if we say that the body is the word of God, what does that do for you?
Cleanses
It
you.
strengthens you to walk
Straight and narrow.
the straight and narrow path. Absolutely. So that's interesting here that the chief of the cupbearers, he gets raised up. He is alive. The blood is life. The chief of the bakers, he is dead. The flesh is dead. The flesh must be eaten. It's an interesting picture, Tracy.
I have a lot.
You have a
This
lot.
just like was like,
I have a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if I can make sense of it at all, but it really is awesome if I
Try.
can.
What do you got?
So first he says, your interpretations are for God, tell it to me. So this is like in John 14:6, no one comes to the Father but through me. Well, right
That's what
into
I
John
was gonna say,
15, he talks about I am the vine and my Father is the vine dresser.
Yep.
And so this Israel is also called the vineyard. And when he returns, he's returning to gather his fruit.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is what's happening here is there are 3 branches and they've ripened into grapes, so it's good fruit. Okay? And then he says the 3 branches are 3 days. Well, if we're doing the days as 1,000 years. In Hosea 6, he says, after 2 days I will raise you up.
Yep.
So we've got into the 3rd day, John 2:19 says, destroy this temple and in 3 days I will raise it up. And it says he is speaking about the temple of his body, and we are his body.
Yes.
So that's just awesome to me. Like there's something. This is the good part.
Yeah.
The flesh part says here that the guy was hung on a tree. Well, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree, and that's for breaking the covenant,
Yeah.
Torah. The Messiah took that penalty for us.
Yeah.
So if you are not producing this good fruit, you are cursed, and you're still hanging on that tree.
Thinking about hanging on a tree, Yeshua was in bondage, nailed to a tree, next to 2 criminals, right? One was granted eternal life, the other was not.
Right.
Another picture of Joseph being in prison with these 2 guys that are also prisoners. One of them gets raised to life, and the other does not.
And the flesh is what dies.
The flesh is what
And
dies.
all life, what is it? All life is in the blood.
The life is in the blood.
Life is in
The
the
life of all flesh is in the blood. So that's where the life is, and the death is in the flesh.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, I have one question about the bread,
Go on.
since we're talking about it. I'm getting hungry. Where was it? In 39:6, they also, Joseph was actually in charge of everything, except for the bread. And now bread comes in again. Because it was mentioned like almost extemporaneously he was not in charge of this bread. Can it mean something?
That's an interesting.
It's freaking awesome, man. I noticed that too. I
He
didn't think
does
it's
not concern
excellent.
himself with anything except the bread he ate.
Yeah.
Right.
That's an interesting. Do you see any connection?
I think it is a little bit for almost, again, setting up the stage for what we're just talking
Okay,
about.
so it's kind of like a precursor, a little bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah, but I don't know what the deeper meaning is. I don't understand.
That's an interesting idea. I had not
I
considered.
just have an idea from it must mean something because
Yeah. That's in verse 7. I did not back up far enough. Excuse me.
yeah.
Did I go
That
too
was
far?
before that. It was in the beginning.
Yeah, it says if.
He was in charge of everything except for his bread.
What verse?
39:6,
39,
5 or
verse
6, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And the master left all things in the hand of Joseph, and the master concerned himself with nothing except the bread which he ate. Yeah. That is an interesting idea. I have not considered that. And I wonder how that does relate, that
This struck me
maybe
as weird.
bread
I'm
might
not-
be connected here somehow.
Well, if we're thinking of like the bread being a word anyway, Well, that's kind of what we
That's
should.
his limitation, maybe.
What?
That's maybe his limitation, that he was in charge of so many things, but not the bread, not
He's
the
a
word.
messenger
He was
of
an
the word.
interpreter,
But
but not.
we seek out the word. You don't seek out the word every day.
But he was not in charge of the word. Maybe,
Yeah, but we're-
maybe
we're-
that's
Well,
what
he
it
wasn't in charge of the word. He was just repeating what his father
is. Right,
said.
exactly.
True.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Wait a minute, because it said it actually Joseph isn't the master though. It says the master concerned himself with nothing except the
I have
bread.
something.
You got
I
something?
do,
What do you
because
got?
remember, yeah,
Joseph?
no,
Judas.
Somebody.
Judas Iscariot, he was the one that betrayed
Why don't you stop?
Yeshua, right, and sent him
Go
to
back
his
to
death
five.
ultimately. And Potiphar was part of sending Joseph to his, I don't know, he could have been there forever to death
Okay.
in jail. So I don't know, it was just like a big connection because he wasn't able to share the bread with Potiphar. He wasn't able to share the word because Potiphar somehow was rejecting it, just like Judas Iscariot rejected it because he was destined for that. I don't know, it's just something that just like.
Interesting. Interesting.
So,
No, that's good.
same
That's
thing.
good. That's good. I like that you picked that out. That's an interesting thing, and we had not.
So we're assuming here that Joseph is in control of the bread?
No. Well.
No.
Well, that's why that's what I thought everyone was going down this thing, and it's not.
Yeah, no. It
Everything
seems
by
like.
the
Right.
Not that- yeah,
And
it's
the
like
master
that's the one-
concerned himself with nothing except the bread.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. We're on the same page then.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay.
About time we got on the same
Let me
page.
see where we are here. That's it.
I'm just kidding.
We finished up
You're fine.
39 and 40. Isn't that fabulous?
Didn't Jesus say I'm the bread of life though, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, hold on. We're not quite though.
Mine reads so different.
So, in relation to the Passover and memorial of Yeshua's Passover and the blood and the bread, how does this information and the tie-in with Yeshua affect our own spiritual lives? What do we need to do? We must feed on the Word. I know that this is difficult. Frankly, it is difficult. Did anybody else find it difficult to study the Word?
Yes,
This is hard work.
it's intentional.
It is an intentional thing. And you know, our traditional Christian brothers and sisters have for a long, long time been saying you forgot to study the Bible. And they're absolutely right.
But they're not doing it.
Well,
They are.
they-
Well, the thing is they're reading it but not studying it. There's a big
Right.
difference.
No, that's
Yes,
exactly
that's
right.
absolutely,
Absolutely
true.
right.
Feeding upon the Word is a deliberate process, and I think that just reading it at what the Jews would call a pashat level, just at a surface, I get the story, but I don't see any of the significance. If you're reading it at that level, yeah, you got to have that information. You can get that. I mean, there's so much that you can understand by just reading at the surface level. And any commentary that you read on the Bible is only giving you the surface level. It's going to give you who, what, when, where, why, and how.
Commentary is man's interpretation.
And commentary is also man's interpretation. That's absolutely correct. But you're almost always only going to find the who, what, when, where, why, and how. That's all surface level stuff. But it's not until you read it repeatedly, try to think about it. This is what I believe the scripture in King David is talking about when he's meditating.
And how to apply it.
And applying it.
If you don't apply the
Meditate.
word, you can read it all day long because the devil knows the word and he don't apply diddly
And I
squat.
think that that's definitely true. But if you are reading it on a surface level and you say, oh, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to do my daily Bible study, and you read a chapter in the Bible, and then you put it on your shelf and you say, okay, I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to read another chapter, you're not doing Bible study. You are, that is good. Don't hear me to say that that is not good. What I'm saying is, if you want to feed upon the Word, it's not good enough. If you're just getting that, and you know, your knowledge base will grow, and that is so helpful because then when you read about something, you'll say, you know what, I remember reading something over in that book, and you can start making connections because you've read it.
I don't think that anybody on a deserted island could pick up the Bible without divine intervention and actually get it. Like,
Well,
and I'm
you're
saying, and
absolutely
let me finish this
You're
out.
absolutely right.
They don't even need to be on a deserted island.
Well, yeah, it's true. But the point of it is, and I can speak for myself as someone who hasn't read all the Bible by any means. The things that I learn here, but it's a group, and I think the Bible is written that way too. That it's supposed to bring people together, and you're supposed to come together to learn, and you learn from each other, and we learn different.
If you read in the books of the Old Testament about when they read the Bible, they were reading out loud.
Right.
So that's another key.
Hearing the word.
It's
Faith
about
comes
hearing,
by
yeah.
hearing the word. It doesn't say by reading it or studying necessarily. So there are other ways. And I think as a disciple, the word, that's our job to get in here and dig it out and be with other
Absolutely.
people.
Right.
And you've heard the expression familiarity breeds contempt. Thus is the printing press. So that everybody has a Bible. In fact, we got 10 of them in this house. The hotel room has them. You probably got all 3 or 4 or 5 of them in your own house. Familiarity breeds contempt. If you were living in a day and age before the printing press and you didn't have access to the Bible, you got to remember it. You got to think about it. You got to listen to it. You got to get more engaged. But we are lazy. We are Westerners, and we think that we can just,
Just Google it.
absorb the osmosis. Unfortunately, you really have to actually pay attention. You have to think, and I think that's exactly what King David was talking about. This is meditation.
But the Lord will reveal His word to you
And
as
that
you
was what I was
read it.
relating to what Tim said a moment ago. It's like, I don't think you put anybody on a desert island with the Bible, they're going to get it. Well, without the help of God, that's absolutely true, because Paul says that the things of God to a natural man are foolishness.
Right.
But because they are spiritually appraised. But to one who is being empowered by the Spirit, they are the life. They are the power of God. So this, I think, is what it suggests by this bread and blood. The blood of Yeshua covers our sins, and if we need to eat His flesh. Eat His flesh. Eat His flesh. To give us the strength, the power, the wisdom, the guidance to walk in a straight line and not stagger left and right and fall off the path every day.
Well, I think also when you were talking about reading, you go to the Bible and, okay, I'm going to sit there and read a chapter. It's not so much on how much you read, it's what you learn that you were reading. So you could, even if you take 20 minutes to only understand one little paragraph
Sure.
or one sentence, that will feed you more than reading an entire chapter.
Yeah,
or
if you're doing speed reading or something, yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So, and that's what I always say, it might take a long time to maybe read and understand what you're reading. Because I used to do that. I would sit there
I did too.
and go,
Sometimes
okay,
I
I've got to
still
read
do.
a chapter a day, and then I would sit there and do that, and and it'd be like, well, I really didn't remember anything. I don't even know what they're talking about. So,
I totally understand, and I think you're right. And you know what? When John was talking to me and he was getting started, he's like, I want to get a Bible where I can read through it in a year. It's like, that is a great idea.
I have given up.
That's a great idea to do in your life once, but don't do it again. Because if you read through the whole Bible in a year, you're going way too fast.
Oh, yeah.
You might get through and not understand a thing.
It'd be better for you if you,
Go
like
slow.
Tammy said, were to read one chapter of the Bible repeatedly to where you knew it and you were learning deep stuff and you just kept filling your mind with that. I did that a couple of times in my life with the book of 1 Peter and the book of James. Those were some of my favorite books, and I could literally, practically right now, just quote the book of James to you verbatim because I read it so many times, over and over and over and over. And the same with the book of 1 Peter. You read that thing over and over and over, and you start. It makes sense. It starts to come together. I don't know why it works that way. It just does. It's kind
It's
of
almost
weird.
like what they did in the old age, in middle age, like Lectio Divina, I think it is called.
Road to memorization.
Yeah, indeed. Reading it until you can memorize it, and then you meditate on it, and you read it with different emphasis on different words.
Absolutely.
I'd be dead by then.
Yeah.
You like, but Anthony, on the other hand,
I can read and read and read. Then the Lord has to bring me back to my memory. Otherwise, oh my God, what did they?
no, seriously though, I
All he
think,
did was I
I
learned
just
all
wanted
that.
to encourage you to actually feed.
I'm already old.
Instead of saying I'm going to read a chapter a day, make it your task to read a paragraph a day, and read that same paragraph twice in a day, or read that same paragraph for the whole week. I don't know. You might get something good out of it.
And also, I always suggest to people doing it first thing. It's the first thing you do when you get up. You know, get your coffee, get your Bible, or whatever you do. Because there's several places that talk about him talking to his people early. I spoke to my prophets early, and the manna was given early. It's always at the sun coming up. So there's definitely something to that. And that's what I did. And I read the Bible in 9 months, and I got a whole lot out of it. I mean, and that's just because I couldn't get enough of it. I was diligent every morning. Even if I didn't want to get up, I got up. It's that diligence that he rewards.
He does, absolutely.
And I think you do go through times where you might be reading things and you don't get it. And you have to table it and come back to it. And I think some of that is also by design, because as I learn things,
Familiarity breeds contempt.
as I learn things, I share it, and I'm given, and not everybody is always ready to get something new that I learned, and I think sometimes it's God's timing to feed me certain things.
Sure.
And
What
make
you need for
certain
your life.
connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I
And who
agree.
I'm going to talk to.
We can definitely go through dry spells. And I don't want to discourage you from reading commentaries either, because frankly, as an artist, I can tell you that all work is derivative. I have no original thoughts. I'm not sharing with you anything that I came up with myself. Very, very little. Very little.
Well, somebody else probably did before. You didn't hear about it. I mean, there's no
I'm
original thought in the
giants
world.
Just like everybody else is. You know, it's frankly, there's not really any new revelation going on here. In very rare cases, okay, we're standing on the shoulders of people who worked before us. And yes, I have learned some things on my own, but you know what? I have to work hard to do this stuff, and it's just I've never done that before. I have, in a few occasions, taught Bible study to like high school kids or something, you know, and you just kind of walk them through it and you read it and you explain a couple little things, and it's much easier. But with a group of thinking adults, you know, I gotta
it's a lot
actually put in
different.
some work, and it has really been a blessing to me. I have one more question and we'll wrap up and we can get some food. What do you think is suggested by Joseph saying, "Remember me"?
Do this in remembrance of me.
Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me."
Oh, yeah.
What do you think is suggested by the fact that he forgot him?
Well, people
Oh,
fell
yeah.
away rather
Yeah.
quickly after the church sprung up. Then it's,
Have we
apostasy.
forgotten him? I think we have, to a big degree. I think that is a prophecy.
Well, we've forgotten the true Yeshua.
We lost the dude.
Yeah.
We forgot him
Well, even
completely.
in Revelations, you have left your first love.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that is a little foreshadowing and a little picture that this guy who was raised up and given his life back is urged to just remember what I did for you. He forgot it. He forgot that.
And it all
what you're
worked
just
out
saying
in
about
the
working hard to eat, I think that was the curse, one of the curse, but that's what was prophesied to Adam when he sinned. By the
Work
sweat
by
of
the
your
sweat
brow,
of
you
your brow,
will
yeah.
eat your bread.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, in our next section, and I'll end here, that dude does remember.
Oh, yeah.
Today, I am reminded that I am an idiot. He does.
But the Lord probably brought it to his mind for Joseph's sake.
At the right time and for the right reason, and everything worked out just perfectly according to the plan of God. The man said, "Today I acknowledge my fault. There is a man who can interpret your dream." And today we are in that same position as this baker saying, "Oh, sorry, I forgot."